But before we get started, I just wanted to do a quick kind of popcorn around. If people don't mind sharing their name, their pronouns if they're comfortable, and who you are with. So I've already started, but I'll go ahead and I'll pass it over to Jeff Tate.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Tate. I work for the City of Auburn in the Department of Community Development, but I'm currently helping SKIP. City of Auburn is the administering agency for SKIP, and the executive manager, Claire Vanessa Goodwin's on maternity leave. So I'm here to provide some backup assistance. And I'll move it over to the next person on the screen for me, which is Sabrina.
Everybody, Sabrina Velarde. I'm with the City of Bellevue. My pronouns are she, her, and Hannah, who I'll pass it to in a second, and I work for the Community Development Department for the City of Bellevue, and we're on the Affordable Housing team. I'll pass to you.
Thanks, Sabrina. Hello, folks. It's good to see many familiar faces. Hannah Bondmiller, currently with the City of Bellevue as a senior affordable housing planner, and here today to support Sabrina in presenting on some exciting work that we call our C1 program. And I'll pass it over to a familiar face, Colleen.
Hey, Hannah. So nice to see you again. Colleen Brandt Sluter, she, her pronouns, Human Services Manager for the City of Burien. I'll pass it to Liz.
Thanks, Colleen. Liz Stead, City of Burien, just previously City of Bellevue. So nice to see some previous coworkers on the call. I'll pass it to Alan.
Hi, Alan Dotterman. I'm with TWH Development. We're a national developer, and we have a few projects in our pipeline in King County and in the state of Washington. And I will pass it on to Kathleen.
Hi, everybody. Kathleen Hosfeld. I'm with Homestead Community Land Trust, and looking forward to talking with you all later. I will pass it on to Taylor.
Taylor Jones, she, her, and I am a senior planner with the City of Fife. Thank you for extending this invite to us down here in the South Sound. And I will pass it on to Peter. I don't think you've gone yet.
Thanks. Peter Ortzer, retired home builder, was a VIP, now I'm a PIP, previously important person, but continue to work on housing advocacy issues around the Sound. Call on somebody. Ethan Robinson.
Hey everybody, my name is Ethan Robinson. I'm the advocacy organizer at Habitat Seattle King County. My pronouns are he, him. Happy to be with you all today. I can popcorn it over to Jan. I don't think you've gone yet, Jan.
No, that's correct. My name is Jan. I'm the pastor at the Methodist Church in Tukwila. And we'll keep this Methodist string going with, where did you go? Jenny? Jenny, you're there somewhere. I know you are. Yes. Excuse me. I'm Jenny Parch. I'm the pastor at the Highline United Methodist Church in Burien. My pronouns are she, her. I'll pass it to Kevin.
Hey, good morning. Good afternoon, I guess. Kevin Hunter. I'm a consultant working with Black Home Initiative with a focus on currently some work with the faith-based community, working with the Black Church and supporting the BHI kind of in Seattle and Tacoma. So I'll pass it over to Carson.
Hi everyone, Carson Hartman. Recently changed my title, so I'm now a housing planner at King County. I support the Affordable Housing Committee for the most part, A lot of you might have seen me also in plan review meetings. I support that program and also will be kind of stepping in for Isaac Horowitz, who currently leads that program in August. So nice to see everyone again. Let's see, Taylor Jones, have you gone already?
I have, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'm just joining the meeting. Neil Tabor, City of Tukwila.
Yeah, thanks, Carson. Hi, Neil Tabor, Senior Planner with the City of Tukwila. He, his pronouns. Happy to be here, and I'm going to go ahead and pass over to Cheney.
Hi, thanks. Cheney Scatson, planner at the City of Federal Way. She, her pronouns. Is that it? Yeah. Who's next? If someone wants to just go who hasn't gone yet. Shay? Has Shay gone?
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm driving. My name is Shay Smiley. I am the Housing, Health, and Human Services Program Manager for the City of Gig Harbor, and thankful for the invitation to be here. I will go ahead and popcorn it over to, has Colleen gone?
Yes. Since you're driving, I'm happy to take it and pass it to Maisha Barnett.
Thanks, Dorsal. Hi, I'm Maisha Barnett, currently a free agent, focusing on family real estate holdings, and I will pass it to AJ.
Hi, thanks, Maisha. Good afternoon, AJ Kari, LISC Puget Sound, Senior Program Officer. I joined a little bit late, so I'm not sure who has not gone yet. So jump in if you haven't.
I can go, thanks. I'm Ryan Windish. I'm with the City of Sumner. I'm the Community and Economic Development Director. Good to be here. And I'm here late too, so if somebody else wants to take it.
I'm happy to jump in. My name is Neely McQueen, she, her pronouns, and I'm the pastor of Overlake Church in Redmond, Washington.
And I can hop in. I'm Mary Connolly, she, her pronouns, and I work with the South Sound Housing Affordability Partners, or SHAPE. I'm like Dorsal, but in Pierce County. And I am also not sure who else has not gone. Oh, I know Eric. I don't think Erica's gone. Looking for my Pierce County folks.
Thanks, Mary. I'm also from Pierce County. I'm Erica Rhett Hunt, she, her pronouns. And most recently, I work for the County Council office. I'm really struggling. I've been here from the beginning, but I still can't figure out who hasn't gone. So my apologies.
I can jump in. My name's, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm Grace Wood, she, her pronouns, and I am a new face from King County Housing Authority. And I'll pass it to Josh.
Thank you. Josh Steiner, Senior Planner at the City of Auburn. And I don't know, I might be last, I'm not sure.
I think you are, but every time I say that, there's always one person I unfortunately have left out. So I'll pause for 1 second. All right. Well, thank you all so much again for being here. I'm really excited. Thank you all for just introducing yourselves. It always helps to know who's in the room. And I really hope that we're able to have a discussion today. But we have the opportunity to learn from a wonderful group of experts providing different lenses on kind of the faith-based partnership, from the developer side to the governmental side, onto the actual faith-based leaders in our community that are supporting the communities that we all live in. And so I'm very excited to start us off by reintroducing Kathleen Hosfeld, someone I've learned an immense amount from. She is the CEO and Executive Director of Homestead Community Land Trust, and she has had a lot of success with faith-based partnerships, and I'm excited to learn more.
Thank you, Dorsal. It's really a pleasure to be here. Excited to see lots of familiar faces and have a chance to share our experiences with all of you. I am by no means an expert on faith-based partnerships, but one of the things that I bring to this work is that before I joined Homestead in 2014, I was an organizational consultant, and I did did some work with churches on visioning and strategic planning. And I also got a degree, a theology degree from Seattle University School of Theology and Ministry. So I speak church, and that has been very helpful in our Homestead's work. It's by no means a direct line to the folks that we've partnered with on our several projects so far, but both of those things have helped immensely. Dorsal asked me to cover how we've worked with faith communities on housing projects, the challenges of navigating church needs and priorities from a developer perspective, and then what developers need to know to be successful. So I'll just dive in. And I'm going to start with kind of what's happening with churches. And this was the context by which I was often being invited in to do strategic planning with churches back in the day. There are these long-standing trends in what's happening in the institutional church. It's actually a global trend of institutional religion. It's not just the institutional church, but many sectors of the faith community, whether it be Christian, Jewish, Muslim, the more mainstream churches are experiencing declines in regular attendance, and many folks are identifying as not affiliated with a faith tradition or a church practice. So this is the context in which it's really helpful to be paying attention to these trends and how those are showing up in faith communities. So what we've seen is that financial contributions to churches have declined, as well as fewer members. So you have fewer memberships, actually people signing up to be members of churches, but then the percentage of even those folks that are members, the amounts that they're giving to their churches has declined. The membership thing isn't just a crisis of faith. It's something that's been happening to arts organizations as well. Fewer people want to actually have long-term commitments to anything, whether that's a church or a ticket series for an arts organization or whatever. The trends generally have been in decline. And then many folks have broadened where their charitable support goes. It used to be that folks gave a specific amount of their income to their faith community just as a regular practice, but now they are spreading that out more across other charitable resources that are doing good in the world. So what that has meant for properties is that many of the buildings are too large for the current congregations. The buildings aren't configured correctly for the programs or uses of the church. How we did church 20, 30 years ago is really different than how we do church now. Some of you may remember that there was a philosophy of theology of a spirituality of the whole person, which meant physical aspects, and that's what the era when churches built basketball courts or had swimming pools in their buildings. That certainly is no longer part of how we do church today, but there are buildings where there are swimming pools in the basement that have been filled in, and there are large basketball courts that are used for various purposes that are not necessarily needed in the same way. As you can imagine, building maintenance has become very expensive for folks, and there are grounds and green spaces and parking around the church that are underutilized. There was a rule of thumb for churches for many years that congregational growth was tied to the number of parking spaces that you had. And that rule of thumb just doesn't apply anymore. You can have lots and lots of parking and not have actual membership. So the board has been flipped for congregations. It's a period of uncertainty. Many of them don't know how to go forward, but they do know that they've got property implications of what's happening, and that's what makes them open to having conversations with affordable housing developers and other potential uses. So where they're going is they're thinking, oh, we need to be out doing more outreach and engagement. So one of the reasons that they're motivated to think about affordable housing is they're thinking about bringing in new neighbors and relationships adjacent to the building, or their faith community functions, so that there's more people that might want to engage with them within walking distance. Some of them want to extract actually maximum market value for their land, and they want to do that to sustain themselves financially into the future, to create an endowment, for example. Other churches are really interested in mission impact, and they want to address the affordable housing crisis or other social needs by contributing their land at either a reduced price or maybe for free. But they are also thinking about adapting to a new normal, which is, how can we downsize the church? How can we redevelop our church to a smaller footprint? How can we adapt a new church or reconfigure our current building for new programming? And they are also thinking about, how can we create new revenue streams? If they're located in an urban space, with lots of foot traffic, what does that mean for how they could utilize their building or their real estate to create ongoing revenue other than church giving? So all that's to say, when you approach churches about using land, don't assume that it will be free or cheap. There may be churches that want to do that. They may, and we've had the good fortune of working with a couple of those congregations, but don't assume that it's going to be a real easy sell to get the land at below market. It depend entirely on where that church is and their goals for their own survival. So there are, with that in mind, there are at least 4 different ways that churches think about utilization of their land: outright purchase, outright donation, land donation, and property redevelopment. Sort of within that, property redevelopment is an in-kind payment rather than a direct cash payment. And then there's also leasing the land. And I'll talk about several of our projects and how they demonstrate these different models. So many thanks to Pastor Jan Bolerjack for being our community partner at the Southard. We are having our ribbon cutting for the Southard in Tukwila this Friday. It's a visionary net zero project built on land we purchased from Riverton Park United Methodist Church. Thank you, Pastor Jan. And she'll be talking a little bit later. But we purchased some of this land. The land immediately prior to development was a pea patch, but prior to that, it was a field for church league baseball or softball, can't remember. So it was a wonderful open field with lights that they used to use it for night games. But we've built 18 homes on this property, 11 permanently affordable, 2 homes for adults with disabilities, and then we have 5 market rate homes that we're selling. So, hey, if you want to live in Tukwila near light rail and in a net zero salmon safe home, talk to me. I can make you a deal. But this was a purchase at below market. The church gave us a price that was somewhat below market. This was a long time ago. It was in like 2016 or 2017. This was a project that took a lot of doing to get it over the finish line. But we're grateful to the church for being our partners in this project. Another example is our partnership with Admiral UCC Church in West Seattle. We have an arrangement with Admiral Church wherein we are paying a cash contribution up front, but the largest contribution we're making back to the church for access to its land is we are redeveloping their church space as an in-kind contribution. So we'll be building a 4,300 square foot church space surrounded by primarily townhomes and then a few stacked flats on top of the church. And the stacked flats will create homes for seniors who need a smaller home and less maintenance issues, but also for persons with disabilities who can't navigate the stairs in a townhome. Our relationship with Pastor Jan actually came as an introduction from Susan Boyd at Bellwether Housing. Bellwether had taken a look at some of the property, so we were introduced to Pastor Jan and the church through those means. The Admiral Church project was a project where I had sent emails to the church because I knew they were developing, but we didn't really connect until Lisa Herbold, who was a Seattle City Council member, hosted an event and invited City of Seattle OH folks to talk about what it would take to do affordable housing on the site. And we were one of the parties that showed up to that. The site isn't necessarily amenable to rental housing, so it became a natural opportunity for an affordable home ownership project. And the final example that I'll tell you about is we are in conversation with Goodwill Baptist through the Nehemiah Initiative. We have not concluded an arrangement or an agreement yet, but we have been working with Goodwill Baptist for over a year on a proposal to develop a piece of property that they have at 15th and Fur into a small condominium building. And in this case, the church's goal is to retain ownership of its land. So we are working on a pro forma that would allow us to pay a lease to the church and some ongoing revenue to the church. They would retain ownership of the land. This would be a condominium structure in which the land itself is a condominium unit that the church would continue to own, and then the individual homeowners would own their condo units, which is their dwellings that they purchase. So those are three examples of arrangements we've had with folks. Some tips for y'all are understanding the church's mission, values, and congregational strength, and what their goals are, their financial and mission goals, but also just understanding their desired land ownership structure, whether they are comfortable selling outright or would like to lease. I put a picture up here of Gethsemane Lutheran Church, kind of an example of one of the early forerunners of a partnership between affordable housing and a church building. This is in the urban center, so it's a little different than what South King cities are looking at and trying to work with suburban churches, but it is a model for doing rental housing for those who are below 60% AMI, and worth taking a look at in terms of how that partnership evolved. Also, build authentic relationships with the church. These shouldn't be transactional kinds of, all right, do you want to sell your land? Do you not? Okay, goodbye. It really should be about getting to know the church and being in partnership with their goals. You'll need to do a lot of due diligence on taxation, zoning, and community support for housing at that particular location, and also just generally in the area. You'll want to look at what is the desire for partnership or just a handoff. You know, does the church really want to be involved, or they just want to sell it and be done with it and just get the money? And similarly, you'll want to think about long-term partnership agreements for the management of what gets built, the cost sharing for what gets built, and decision making. Some resources for you to be aware of: Church Council of Greater Seattle Faith and Land Initiative, Faith Action Network. These are two religious coalitions that I think are working on with churches on mobilizing land for affordable housing. The Interfaith Task Force on Homelessness, the City of Seattle's Affordable Housing on Religious Property Ordinance. Cities might want to take a look at that. It's zoning incentives for churches. And then also think about what's happening with the Archdiocese of Seattle, the Catholic Church, in terms of their church consolidation effort and what they're planning to do with churches that don't remain owned by the diocese or the local congregations. There you have it. I'll answer any questions.
Any questions from the group? Well, thank you so much, Kathleen. That was a wonderful presentation. It was very concise, and I appreciate it.
Actually, can I jump in with a question if that's okay? Sorry, I was slow on unmuting. Thanks, Kathleen. That was great. One question I had, as you know, we're working with LISC is working with a number of churches also, including with Nehemiah Initiative. I'm curious from your standpoint, like you've probably seen different examples of this, but like what's the range of the expectation that the churches have as they see their sites as housing opportunities for their congregation? Do they try to make that connection at all, whether it's for rental or for home ownership?
Well, in terms of the folks we've worked with, the expectations have been pretty broad. In the case of working with Goodwill, obviously we're working in the Central District where there's been wholesale displacement of Black people from the Central District, and a displacement of people into suburban areas of King County, where parishioners, former parishioners, and current parishioners are driving a long way to come back to church. And I think there is a desire to create opportunities for them to come home and come back to be in closer proximity to the church. But the actual, I don't think we'll know for sure what the traction is with current parishioners until we actually start doing, we have a project and we start doing buyer outreach to the church and the surrounding community and see what the uptake actually is. So I think the jury's out on that one. I certainly think that some churches have thought, oh, if we create more density right around us, certainly that's got to translate into more parishioners who are perhaps not currently attending. But one of the mitigating factors that I go into in the notes is that during COVID, everybody, was attending church remotely, and the hybrid attendance model has lingered and shows staying power. So many of the folks who have been displaced are actually just finding it more convenient to attend church remotely from wherever they live currently, if they've been displaced for other reasons. So that's one of those trends that is affecting folks, and it's also what affects the demands for actual church space and building size.
Oh, interesting. The impacts of COVID with faith too. Could you comment too on the stewardship piece of it? In terms of ongoing affordability, I'm sure there's a range there also in terms of how the different churches are involved, or do they look to you as an organization to help with stewardship, or what does that look like?
Well, for sure in home ownership, and permanently affordable home ownership, we as developers, we'll stay in relationship with the project forever. So we're the ones that know how to do the stewardship. That would not be handed off to the church to manage going forward. And I think as you think about other forms of affordable housing, rental housing, I think you're going to have folks entertaining all kinds of different ideas about how much they want to be involved in the ongoing management or participation in the life of what gets built on their land. So that's again one of those questions that it's good to explore with them during early stage feasibility, so that expectations are clear. And I mean, one of the factors is when you have like 30 people showing up every week instead of a couple hundred, you think about those folks that are kind of tired. They're running their own church, and that's quite a bit for them to manage and think about. And as much as they may love the social service mission of their partner, they just may not have the bandwidth to help very much. Yeah. But a lot of churches are doing this thing called community supper, or they call it community lunch or whatever, and they can show up, once or twice a week and staff a meal in partnership with community lunch or community supper. But that's about it.
Okay.
So
okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Last call for questions. All right, thank you so much, Kathleen. I really appreciated it. All right, so we will transition over to the government side and what planning can do to kind of enable and empower these partnerships. And so we have Sabrina Vilarde, the Housing Stability Program Coordinator from the City of Bellevue, and we have Hannah Bonmiller, the Senior Planner for the City of Bellevue, who will be presenting on the C1 strategy that they're implementing there.
Well, thank you so much for having us. So I'm going to share my screen. And you all should. Is it looking good now, Dorsal?
We're seeing it now, Sabrina, but it's not in presentation mode yet.
Oh. And now?
We're still seeing the PowerPoint version.
It's weird because it's showing up here. 1 second. Let me stop and then reshare. Nothing makes me feel more like I don't know tech than presenting on Zoom.
You're doing great. Zoom just keeps changing everything.
All right. Better?
It's still the presenter.
Oh my goodness.
Do you want me to share it, Sabrina?
Yeah. Do you want to try that, Hannah?
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks, all.
I just have to work with one screen.
So while we do that, I just wanted to give a little bit of background on myself. I am relatively new to the city of Bellevue. I have been with the city for officially 7 months. It'll be. I'm just at the end of 6 months. And I come from Miami, Florida, where I focused primarily on housing advocacy, policy advocacy, a lot of tenants' rights policy as well. And I love Washington, so I decided to move here, and the city of Bellevue welcomed me with open arms and had me work on C1 initially. So we call it the C1 program, and I'll explain that in a second. But the city of Bellevue has made it a priority to increase affordable housing development capacity wherever we can. And we feel that working with faith-based owners is an excellent opportunity, as a lot of folks, as Kathleen was explaining earlier as well, are experiencing not just a dip in congregants, but they are also uniquely attuned to their congregants' issues, right? So if folks are struggling with finding housing, with commute times, with affordability generally, they are the ones who hear it first. They're kind of a frontline comfort, right? So we can go to the next slide. A little bit of background on the C1 program. So there are a couple of places, a couple of touch points where it started, right? First, Bellevue created an affordable housing strategy or plan in 2017. There were 5 broad actions and 21 strategies. Almost immediately after that, the state enabled local governments to create incentives for nonprofit or religiously owned property owners or property managers, right, to build affordable housing. And the state legislation was relatively broad. So the city of Bellevue then came back and created a comprehensive plan amendment to provide these incentives locally, and provided some direction on how to create a land use code amendment to incorporate some of these amendments. Which leads us to strategy C. And strategy C, very broadly, was create more affordable housing. So strategy C1 is to specifically increase the development potential on suitable land owned by public agencies, faith-based, and nonprofit housing entities. So C1 was still relatively broad, right? And we're going to continue to get more and more narrow as we move into phase 1 of action C1. And so phase 1 established a little bit more criteria, right? So we've got a 50% density bonus for permanent affordable housing on certain properties. It was a very strict requirement, and through it's going to continue. You'll continue to see that it's a strict requirement for 100% affordability. There is some flexibility in where it can be, but it didn't quite incorporate single family zoned areas. So a lot of what came out of some of that stakeholder engagement is there are a lot of churches and faith-based owned properties in single family home areas throughout the city of Bellevue. And so from that comes what we call C1 phase 2. And there were 36 designated eligible sites under this specific criteria in the single family zoned areas. So phase 2 is primarily what we work with at the city because there are so many opportunities. So 3 overarching criteria: affordability, 100% affordability, that's the through line. Ownership, it has to be owned or controlled by the faith-based organization, but specifically that owned or controlled only applies when it's being rezoned. Once it's been rezoned, it can be owned by the developer, nonprofit agency, whoever's going to take the next step to get us those units, as long as it was originally owned by a faith-based organization. And then location, so we're talking single family zoned areas located near transit or high traffic areas, right? And then within 500 feet of multifamily or commercial land use district, because we're essentially doubling the density. And then next slide, please. Thank you. So the land use code amendment, or the LUCA, incorporated this criteria and ratified all of the work that kind of came out of that engagement. And I didn't speak to the timeline a little bit earlier, but note that this was a years-long process. So the city engaged their affordable housing team at the time and created that affordable housing strategy in 2017. We got state legislation in 2019. Then phase 1 came through in 2021. Then phase 2 officially came through only last year in June. So we're actually, as of today, I'm just realizing. So as of today, it's been a year since we codified the C1 phase 2 program. So of these 36 eligible sites, I did bring a couple of examples with us. And the first one is 30 Bellevue. And I put up 30 Bellevue even though it came through before any of these code changes were official, because St. Luke's Church in the city of Bellevue they kind of originated the idea, right? So they wanted to meet the needs of their constituents. They had already engaged with Imagine Housing, who worked with them on this idea. And then a lot of the criteria that came forward afterwards in the affordable housing strategy, in the changes to the code, come from this model, where this partnership. So we have 62 units in that building. They're all currently in service. And they did receive funding from the city of Bellevue and from ARCH, Regional Coalition for Housing, to create this. They also received vouchers from King County for, I believe, 10 of the units that they've got. And so far it's been going well. It's in a single family neighborhood. And then St. Peter's. So this example is after the zoning had already been ratified and it's still in the process. So they have identified a developer partner to work with, but it's still being negotiated. So I can't quite speak to who it is, but it's all moving forward the way that it's supposed to. And once again, this is an excellent example of meeting every single criteria. It's near a transit zone, you're near a park, which wasn't required, but very helpful. You've got the Crossroads neighborhood nearby. So the Crossroads is a place, we've got a magnificent community center there. There are resources and services all nearby, and all of that is within walking distance of what will soon be a pretty large development on the St. Peter's United Methodist property. And then the last example that I'm going to put forward is First United Methodist. So this property, we've got almost 3 acres, and the underlying zoning, I know I put all of these acronyms and things on the slide. And so all of these things, what they really mean is if you double it, we can get 87 units on this property. And they're still exploring what they'd like to do. So 30 Bellevue was before the code. St. Peter's is ongoing. It's a successful partnership that's going on right now. And then Bellevue First Methodist is something that we could have in the future should they decide to move forward with rezoning their property. So I know that I've blown through things like pretty quickly, but I felt like this was a subject, especially the zoning questions, that we could go through in a more conversational style. So if folks want to ask about the process or how we started, I've left time at the end of my presentation to kind of go through that. I think we just have a questions slide. Oh, no, we do have next steps. Apologies, folks. So one thing, and I think we'll probably hear it a lot today, right, is outreach and engagement is incredibly important when you are working with faith-based organizations. I think throughout our process at the city and as we move forward with updating our affordable housing strategy and updating our housing targets, we are incorporating engagement with religiously owned, faith-based organizations, especially those of the 36 that we identified originally. And you've got folks who are not developers, folks who are maybe want to provide a service or are really interested in using their land for a benefit, whether it's to help them sustain their programs long-term through a sale of their property or portions of their parcels, or it's to directly serve their constituents or their staff. Everybody kind of has a different motivation, and our priority is to work with them to help them get them there. So if that means connecting them through Arch to a consultant, or connecting them to enterprise community partners, for example, for their faith-based development initiative that provides technical assistance to churches. So we work with folks where they are, we meet them where they are, and then we help them get to the next step, and we explain how the code works and how it would apply to them. And that's an ongoing process. We continue to do that. And now for questions. Thanks, Hannah.
And I'll stop sharing my screen, because then you can have a chance to see more people. Happy to go back to any of the slides though.
Mary.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the technical assistance piece. Do you mostly just kind of like make connections with other organizations, or do you have like a planner who's dedicated to working with churches when they come to you all? And then my other question is about funding, because I know in terms of, I was talking to somebody who works with churches who are interested in potentially developing, and one of their biggest barriers is the funding for like feasibility studies. And where do you get that like first chunk of change to like see if this is even feasible? And I know there are some options like impact capital, or I think there's something else I'm forgetting. But yeah, wondering what the churches you've worked with have used for those feasibility studies.
Both excellent questions. So first question, do we have a dedicated planner? Not necessarily for technical assistance. It's mostly to help guide them through the process. And so not in-depth shopping around for developers with them, or consultants and stuff like that. It's more guidance and connecting them to existing resources. Arch is also an excellent support on that end. So we work very closely with them on a number of programs, including C1, to help get churches connected to a developer. Because we can't, as the city, I can't steer someone to a consultant, right? So Arch primarily handles most of those conversations. To your second question on funding. So the city does have some funding sources. My primary responsibility is the Housing Stability Program in the city of Bellevue, and that is a fund. It is the tax collection for HB 1590. And so that primarily focuses on supportive housing, behavioral health services, and some of the churches who've already started to take advantage of the program have been interested in applying for Housing Stability Program funds because they want to meet some of those lower income needs. So they're looking at our Housing Stability Program prioritizes 0 to 30 with some flexibility to go 0 to 60% of the area median income. But it also supports on-site supportive services, and churches have been interested in that. We actually just released an RFP last Friday. There's 10 million available there for the fees of, oh, sorry, Mary, you're gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask to clarify if that was just for like the capital and services, or if it was also for the feasibility, which it sounds like you were about to answer.
Yes. So capital, yes. Housing Stability Program is capital at OMS. The city also has a contingency affordable housing fund, which is kind of our general affordable housing fund that is a lot more flexible and can possibly be used for that, but we're still working on creating the criteria for future funding options there. Other funding sources also come from Arch, and they do help, but they have a formal application process for capital, and we're working through what it would look like to help churches with feasibility as well. Last thing on feasibility, Enterprise Community Partners does provide some of that feasibility funding as part of their technical assistance cohort for their faith-based development initiative. There are 2 churches that are participating in that program in the city of Bellevue, but there are quite a few East Side churches, I think, the last time we spoke with them.
Okay, and then just one other question. When you
Yes.
said general affordable housing fund, is that just like general dollars, like not from any specific revenue source?
Yeah,
Okay.
those are like our line item budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Carson?
Sorry, I was looking for my mouse there. And I apologies if you I think this is going to be a repeat, but I just wanted to understand. So there are only certain types of church properties that are eligible for the rezonings, and proximity to multifamily is particularly one. And I just was wondering if you could talk a bit more about the criteria. Mostly I'm just interested to know if there are like if there were another church property, say, in a zone that weren't adjacent to multifamily already, would that be, maybe there hasn't been one and you don't have a stance on this yet, but I'm wondering why limit it to just multifamily adjacent.
So I'll handle some of like the high level code, and then I'll pitch it to Hannah to get a little bit more detailed. But the first part of your question on certain properties being eligible. So because the code changes came in different phases, the first one was very broad. It didn't specifically focus on faith-based ownership, and it was looking only at kind of multifamily and commercially zoned areas. But phase 2, they added that single family because there ended up being a lot more churches in those single family areas with larger parcels. So that's the policy reasoning, and then I'll hand it to Hannah.
Yeah, thanks, Sabrina. So, Carson, the 2019 state legislation required cities to provide that 50% density bonus, and that actually is for religiously owned or nonprofit owned organizations in either multifamily or single family. So regardless of location, they can access that 50% density bonus. The phase 2 program is saying, hey, we applied this base bonus to all of these organizations, but we know there are some sites that would actually be suitable for greater densities beyond that 50%. And so that's where that criteria comes in, is that's what's identifying the properties that would be eligible for zoning over that base 50% density bonus. And so like Sabrina said, that's proximity to transit and also proximity to another higher density zone like a multifamily or commercial property. And so through our phase 2 process, we identified those 36 sites that we know will qualify for that rezone, and we rezone them outright. But say in the future, zoning designations change, there's new faith-based organizations that come up in the city, they would be eligible to for a rezone to add what we call our affordable housing suffix to their property so that they could access that in the future if they met those eligibility criteria. So that's a little bit more background into it. It's really an effort to go further than phase 1, recognizing that, you know, we did what the state required, and we know there's opportunities to do more with these parcels that have opportunities for greater density.
Thank you.
All right, a last call for questions for Sabrina or Hannah. All right, well, thank you both so much for the presentation. It was very insightful and I learned a lot, and I really appreciate the opportunity. All right, we will move on to our final agenda item piece. Of course, you need a developer for this partnership, and you need a city or a jurisdiction willing to work with you to site in their jurisdiction. But to really have a faith-based partnership for affordable housing, you have to have the faith-based component, the faith-based leaders in our community that are thinking about this crisis. And so we have a few joining us today. We have Pastor Jenny Partch from the Highline United Methodist Church. We have Reverend Jan Bowlerjack from the Riverton Park United Methodist Church. We have Pastor Neely McQueen from the Overlake Christian Church. And I don't know if Donald King from the Nehemiah Initiative slipped in while we were chatting. Doesn't look like it. All right. So we will move forward. And so I have a couple of prepared questions for our panelists, and then we will open it up for discussion for the rest of the meeting. But I thought it might be helpful if we could ask each of our faith-based leaders to start by just please telling us a little bit about yourself and the community that you lead. And if Pastor Neely wants to start us off, that would be great.
Sure, be happy to. I am a longtime Kirkland resident, been in Washington in the Seattle area, Kirkland area for 20 years, at Overlake for 20 years, leading a community who has changed drastically over the years. We moved into our church in 1997 and have gone through 4 transitions of leadership. So kind of a bit of a transition and change of congregation. We are a multi-ethnic congregation made up of people in different socioeconomic groups. We represent pretty well what Redmond looks like now, which I would say that's definitely a change in the church we were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I came into my role at Overlake 3 years ago. Alongside another gentleman, so we co-lead the church together, and I am the first woman that Overlake has had in this position, so it's also been some transition theologically over the years. So that's a little bit about our community.
Thank you. Pastor Jan, would you like to introduce yourself and your community next?
Sure, thank you. I've been in ministry for over 30 years. This is my 5th church, I believe, and I've been here for 17 years in Tukwila. When I got here, it's a small congregation, but very active in the community. There was already a property project going on when I got here in 2007, I guess it was. And it was a $1.3 million project where they were taking all 6 acres of land for, it was not a nonprofit. It was a regular development for 1.3 million. And as you know, the economy tanked in 2008 and that project just totally fell apart. So I was kind of glad for that. It felt like the church had gone into that as a way to save themselves, to get money to be able to keep being a church. And so we spent the next few years looking at mission and what the purpose was for this church, and came around to where we wanted to work with a affordable housing project and only sell part of our property. So it took, like I said, it took years to finally get Kathleen and her group interested. We had a lot of people out looking at the property, deciding what was the best project to bring forward. And here we are now in 2024, ready to have people move into this house, into these houses. So it's been a long process. It was learning by, there were no guides. We were early enough in this process of what churches are trying to do that there were no booklets written saying you do a feasibility study, you go to the county, and whatever. Those steps weren't there. Now they are. So if you're thinking about this, I spent the last year with Enterprise going through a whole training session. They have a whole book that gives you step by step what you do from the church side and from the developer side. It's just very handy. We would have not tripped over a lot of things if we had had that along the way. So I will end with that, and I think it's Jenny's turn, isn't it?
Oh, you're still muted, Pastor Jenny.
My computer won't let me just use the space bar. So I've been the pastor at Highline United Methodist Church in Burien for 8 years. The church sits on a major arterial, First Avenue in Burien. So we've always had a lot of unhoused folks stop by asking for help. Our neighborhood is predominantly single-family homes, with the majority of those households living at 50 to 80% AMI. The congregation has always supported programs for unhoused folks. We've had Tent City on our site before. And 5 years ago, we worked with other churches in the area to open a severe weather shelter in the midst of a looming snow crisis, and have continued to provide that severe weather shelter with the cooperation of the city of Burien. Let's see. And our work with the shelter has then led us to create a day center that's open 2 days a week, where we serve lunch, provide showers, personal supplies, computer access, and those kinds of things. Our church, we seek to understand how to support and accompany people living with mental illness and or substance use to strive towards healing, health, and wholeness. Our building is aging, out of code for fire safety, and built for large gatherings and education programs, which limits our capacity to be a year-round shelter. And that's something that we are looking to expand.
Thank you. Starting now with Reverend Jan, how did conversations about utilizing your land for affordable housing begin?
Well, like I said, it began before I got here, so I don't know how it began. I know how the revision of it went to move from making money to sustain the congregation to it being a mission of the congregation. And that was just a lot of conversation about what's the purpose of the church, what's needed in the community, what how we can be a part of it. And it continues to evolve. You know, we just 2 years ago we put in tiny homes as a way to respond to what's needed in the community, and now for the last year and a half we have dealt with being a welcome center for the migrants, and have housed 300, 500 people here. So for this congregation, which is about 10 people now, it's all about what's needed in the community and how we respond to that. I don't know, did that kind of answer your question?
Yes, I think so. And Pastor Jenny, you mentioned similar a little bit of the background, but I just wanted to give you a chance potentially to add, how did the conversations around moving beyond severe weather into potentially more substantial affordable housing kind of take place?
Yeah, so the fact that our building is limiting our capacity to do more, we were offered the opportunity to participate in the Church Council of Greater Seattle's Faith Land Discernment cohort. And then from that, we spent 2 years talking with folks in the community. It included folks with the city of Burien, nonprofits, our unsheltered or unhoused folks that we shelter, different organizations in the community. And it became clear that we did need more services for our unhoused community, and how affordable housing was also important. So we have, and also for our immigrant community, housing for immigrants was a big piece of that. So we have also gone through the cohort with Enterprise, their faith-based development initiative, to learn how the development process works. So.
Thank you. Pastor Neely.
Yeah. About 10 years ago, we started doing safe parking at the urging of some other community members. So we started opening up our parking lot, and that kind of began different conversations. We then turned our back half of our building into a day center. So we've been doing that for about 10 years in partnership with the city of Redmond. So they send over a caseworker twice a week. Actually, Kent Hayes used to be our caseworker, but he moved. He was pulled down south. So, but we still have a caseworker come twice a week to help with just assisting and getting access to resources. And so that's been the past 10 years, which has kind of just changed how we see our community and engage our community. When I stepped into this role about 3 years ago, we are on 27 acres of land. Our building is 5 acres, and we're in a manufacturing zone. So we began to ask the conversation, saying when we stepped into the role, like, what does the community need? We met with community members, community leaders, and housing just came up every single time. And we're like, well, we have land. We do actually have land, but it's not zoned. At that time, City of Redmond was doing their 2050 plan, city planning. So we approached the city and said, are you open? Would you change our zoning? And they said, just based on things that were happening in the community, that it wasn't possible for them to make that zoning change. But the legislation had just passed in 2019. And so we began to work with the city on what that legislation could look like, how it could impact us. Since we aren't in a multi-family area, we are in a commercial, more manufacturing area. And so we've been working with them, and it looks like we're close to seeing that legislation pass so that we can do affordable housing. So we began having conversations with again, community members, nonprofits, partners like Arch, like what can we do? How can we get affordable housing on our land, since we have so much land to offer the community? But it really birthed out of like safe parking, this idea that we got to see we're near a trail. So we had a lot of those who are unhoused, who were on the trail, who would come in for showers. We've in the last 10 years have seen 150 of our individuals from our safe parking end up in permanent housing with various partners. So just that kind of changed our direction as a church. We probably saw an issue and began to see, oh, we have resources to do that work.
Thank you. And that's why you all are leaders in our community, and we appreciate your leadership. So for those of Kathleen raised a really good point. There's a talking church that can be really helpful for a planner or developer who's interested in starting these partnerships. Pastor Jenny, what advice or what's the best way a planner or a developer could reach out to or initiate contact with a faith-based organization to partner?
Well, for us, we're at the very beginning of our pre-development work. We have money to do that, and so just emailing us to set up a introduction would be great. I think prior to this, I realized that not all churches are thinking about housing and affordable housing, and so in the Methodist Church, you can see that there's a lot of United Methodist projects going in Bellevue and around. It's an initiative of our conference, which is Washington and Northern Idaho. So reaching out to the adjudicating body of any of the mainline Protestant denominations would be a good idea, just to see what churches are talking about it, thinking about it, and then because we provide services in our city, our human services department of the city of Burien knows us and knows all the churches that are doing social service work in their community. So they're a place to connect and get introduced to churches. I had, at a previous church I was at, had worked a little bit with the Housing Development Consortium. And I think, like Jan was saying, churches didn't have an avenue of learning this process. And I think groups like the Housing Development Consortium or others that maybe I don't know of could really help bridge these relationships by having like an open forum for churches to come and learn about development and developers to meet churches, those kinds of things. And also, there's a lot of churches that just sit kind of by themselves and think, oh, we'd love to do this. They see the need for it. They hear about it. Churches, whether they want to or not, are dealing with unhoused folks. And so, but they don't realize that there's these partnerships that can be made and that they, as a church, don't have to come up with all the capital to build a $60 million building. So reaching out and helping folks understand the process is a big part of it.
Thank you. Pastor Neely, how would you recommend we talk church?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sabrina from Bellevue said it well. Like we're not developers. We don't know kind of what we're doing. I try to explain to people that most pastors, our seminary training did not equip us to do some of these, to enter into some of these conversations. So I think just being willing to engage. I appreciated Kathleen from Homestead saying like, be interested in mission, be interested in their values. Like those things are important to us. We tend to be motivated more out of our convictions than, out of, let's say, best business practices, our convictions about like, mission and how can we make a significant difference. So I think approaching people, being willing to listen to them. I have felt like a few conversations with developers. They want to tell me what I don't know. And that's helpful because I probably don't know it, but also it feels like they haven't expressed interest in kind of what our church is about and our congregation's about and our mission and vision and values. And that would be important to me as well, as that I recognize there are some developers that we're partners with and some that it's just an agreement. It's a lease of land or a sale. But if it's going to be a healthy partnership, being curious about those parts of our community is really important. So, yeah. But just reach out, send us an email. We got 27 acres,
Pastor Jan, do you have advice on how we should reach out and talk church?
I think it's a two-way street. The church needs to reach out and be a part of the community. So, and that opens the doors to say that you're ready. But I think Jenny and Neely named all the other things, so I'm not just going to repeat them.
Dorsal.
Yes.
I'll add that I know in the city of Burien they've been updating their planning, zoning requirements and things. and of course, there's always public hearings and meetings for those, but it would be great for planning departments to reach out to the faith-based community and say, hey, we're in the midst of this rezoning project. We'd like to know what you all are thinking for the next 5 to 10 years for your property. Because if you can get zoning changes at that level, instead of having to ask for zoning changes that put a spotlight on your church as building something in the community that the community is going to come out against, it'd be really great just to have that worked into the city's plan in the first place.
Thank you. And kind of using that as a bit of a segue and sticking with you for a moment, Pastor Jenny, when you started the conversation or have started talking about affordable housing, have there been styles or housing types that you have found your community or the surrounding community prefers, like home ownership, townhomes, rental, or family housing, those types of things?
The people living pretty much just want it to be affordable. I do know that some of them who live on Section 8 vouchers are looking for ways to purchase something because they see that rents just keep going up and up and up, and Social Security doesn't always keep pace with that. So finding ways for some of our lowest income folks to really live in a holistic way by capping their rents is important to them. So for our land, because we have a community garden and some other spaces that we want to preserve, we are only looking at going up, like apartments or condos, that type of housing.
Thank you. Reverend Jan, you have a home ownership. That was the type of style. Was that part of the desire of the community to have a home ownership, or was it more about affordable housing in general?
I think it was just a conversation between Homestead and us and what Homestead saw was needed most. It took some convincing for me, but and this Homestead Land Trust build is beautiful. I don't think it was the most needed in Tukwila. We need a variety, so that's why we also have tiny homes and we have tents and we have people sleeping on the floor. I think that this provides an opportunity for these 18 folks to purchase their first home. And when we started this project, that felt really important. Times have changed a little bit. These homes are probably going to go to what we would consider middle income I don't know if you would agree with that, Kathleen, but middle income in Tukwila. So not necessarily low income or even what I would consider affordable. But it's still necessary housing. There's just not enough housing. So whatever housing you can put in is going to be helpful.
Thank you. Pastor Neely, especially being next to the manufactured zoning area, is there types of housing that you prioritized?
Yeah, it's probably similar to what Pastor Jan said. It's the sense of there's just a need for affordable housing. I do think what in one of our conversations, some of the more family suited units needed, versus just a studio or a 1-bedroom, but the ability to have higher capacity in a unit. But the number seems to be the greatest need is like how getting as much affordable housing as possible. Seems to be for us in our conversations.
All right, and were you going to add something, Pastor Jenny?
Yeah, this is the hazard of me going first. There's also South King County in general just really, really needs permanent supportive housing. We just don't have any. We've had a couple come online in the last 5 years, but the folks living with mental illness and or substance use disorder, they just really need a place to be, and permanent supportive housing is that. And church property, nobody wants it in their backyard is the problem. And churches can really help support that from a mission standpoint if they would do that. It's really easy to say, yeah, of course we want families living in our neighborhood, and churches love children. So you know, those kind of projects get pushed to the forefront really easily. But I think the lower AMI projects are something. I'm probably talking to churches right now, but they should be supporting those more than they should be supporting a lot of other things.
Yeah, and I would add in on that, in that we had a couple requirements for the build here. One of them was that it needed to be net zero energy use, because one of the things we see is if people could make their rent, they can't make their utilities too. So there's always that juggling going on. So these houses, supposedly, if you use these houses correctly, you don't pay any utility bills, which, it was a major point that we wanted to make. But we didn't get everything we wanted with this because they couldn't pencil it. They couldn't make it pay. So a couple of these houses are not even affordable. They're market rate to be able to make the rest of them work. I fought that tooth and nail because I just didn't want a project that, I don't know. But that was something we had to give up on so that it would actually get built. So I think that's something that you have to be ready for. You may not be able to get what you want because it just won't, unless you have money to put into it on top. We just sold the land and said, you guys build. And so that's what they did.
Conviction always struggles when it comes across the finances.
Reality. Yeah.
So we'll move on to our last question, then we'll open it up. But starting with Pastor Neely, so we talked a little bit about partnerships around like spare land, but are there other ways that planners or developers could collaborate with the faith-based community to partner on affordable housing initiatives?
Yeah, I think that just the conversation collectively around the community, we've been able to, I think, support other projects happening as we can rally community conversation around it. We've gotten to speak positively at City Council about multiple different projects happening and just lend some partnership. And so I think there's a collective, like if we all have the shared value of getting affordable housing, of making affordable housing, like in what ways can we be, we had a conversation with Arch, like what ways can we be allies and influence to our congregation and who are majority live in Redmond, and how do we help foster those conversations? So I think, yeah, I mean, we're, as much as we want to do something here, we want to see things just happen in the city of Redmond with housing. And so we're willing to jump in anywhere and kind of help it make introductions, have conversations, use our voice where we can. So, yeah.
Thank you. Reverend Jan, do you have ways that we can partner beyond just the land sharing?
I do think it is about continuing to tell of our story and our experience, and talk about that we have a ribbon cutting on Friday, finally, and encourage churches to be able to take that risk. So yeah, I think it's a continuing conversation about how churches can use their property and encourage that to happen.
And then I learned my lesson. Pastor Jenny, last to go.
Yeah, so a lot of churches are providing some kind of social service in their community, whether food banks, community meals. With COVID, a lot of churches were pitching in and doing food distribution. There's churches that do elder care and meals for the elderly. And they also have a lot of nonprofits that are using their buildings and partnering with them already. So going into it as a partnership, not just a land grab, I think you'll learn that even if a church is dying by what it looks like on the outside, there's some really vital things that help support the community, that even if it's converted into an apartment building, that church can continue doing its after school program right there on site, or a tutoring program. There can still be community meals, food distribution, and all those kinds of things if those partnerships are maintained. And churches often want to do that, I think, but if they don't understand the process, and they don't understand a lot about affordable housing in terms of the equal housing rights of people that move in there. Sometimes they have an idea like, okay, the people that go to our church are going to get these homes. It's like, no, not necessarily, because anybody can apply for those homes, right? So churches have good intentions sometimes that fall through because the way the contracts get written, or they don't understand enough about housing. But they also have a tremendous amount to offer any community that's there, in terms of those social services, and you don't want to lose those. So.
Well, thank you so much for tolerating my questions, but I'd like to offer the opportunity to the audience if anyone has questions for our panelists. Mary.
I'll ask a question. So I think you've already talked about this throughout, but just a general question of how can jurisdictions be good partners to faith-based communities that are interested in this, especially ones that might be at that stage where they're just like, we have some land, it'd be cool to do something with it, we don't know how to get started. So just if you have anything extra to add on top of what you've already said. And I also wanted to say that I just am grateful for you all to be here, and I really admire you, like, really living out your mission in like a very radical and like material way. So yeah.
Go ahead, Yumi.
I was just going to say, what I have appreciated about our city is how willing they are to like make space and time for us. I mean, because we really are, we talked about being in the enterprise cohort, but we didn't join it. And we've had some partnerships with other outside consultants who have helped us, but the city has been willing to meet with us I think we've shown through our 10 years, like, we really want to help the city of Redmond and the community members. So they have just been willing to meet with us, answer any questions, jump on a Zoom, jump on a call with us. and it feels like we're working together, where I think historically there was some hesitation in our partnership. So that's been really, really helpful. I mean, we met yesterday with one of the city planners who was helping us understand the nuance of what is owned by and controlled by in the legislation, and just spent time walking us through what that meant and basically giving us a class on understanding policy. And so to feel that partnership has been really helpful.
I would echo that learning all the language of the city is difficult. And I think it goes both ways. Like, we can interpret church language as well. But just kind of going into it in that kind of exploratory way, and taking the time to explain things. And I've been grateful to Colleen, who I think is still on this meeting, at the City of Burien, as a human services manager. She's kind of my interpreter for where do I go in the city, who do I talk to, and why do I need a permit for this, and why, and these kinds of things. So yeah, having those people that'll be a liaison maybe is a good piece.
Thank you.
Ryan, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Dorsal. Thank you for the presentations on your respective churches and what you're wanting to do and trying to do. And it's great. We have one church in our city, Calvary Community Church, that has an ample amount. They have quite a bit of extra property, so to speak. And we've been approached by them over the years to see what was possible on their land. And they were way ahead of the curve, honestly, I feel, in terms of recent changes in state law and trying to build incentives. So they actually had an architect in their congregation who was willing to volunteer his time. At least I assume he was volunteering his time to kind of help bridge that gap, which was super helpful for the city and for them to kind of understand what they might getting themselves into. And they definitely were looking at affordable housing, even senior housing, and housing that would provide kind of supplemental revenue, if you will, however you want to kind of put that, funds that could be beneficial as well for the church's mission. So I applaud what you're doing. Hopefully things can progress and work out. We are looking at making some changes to our code that allow for up to like a 50 dwelling units to the acre kind of density increases for the properties on churches for redevelopment. And so we'll see. I think it's a good thing to be looking at, and appreciate the presentation. Just wanted to share my experience.
Well, thank you. I'm gonna do one last call for questions. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here today, and thank you so much to our panelists for sharing your knowledge and your expertise, and for everything you're already doing for all of our communities. We really appreciate it. We are a little bit ahead of time, but that is good. I can't bring the sun back for you, but I can give you 20 minutes of your day back. So thank you all so much. I will send out the slides and the recording information either later today or tomorrow. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And again, thank you for all of the work that every single one of you are doing for our community.